Our story tonight comes to us from the 2nd chapter of St. Luke. And there were shepherds living out in the fields nearby, keeping watch over their flocks at night. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone around them, and they were terrified. But the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid. I bring you good news that will cause great joy for all the people.
Who is it that you look down upon? Who is it that you look at and think, they're not worthy of me? They're inferior to me. It's okay. You can admit it, because we all have those feelings. We all have those feelings about different people. A lot of times we don't even know their names. But there's something about them. It's the way they look, maybe the way they talk, the friends they keep, maybe even the way they smell. There's something about those people make you feel a little bit superior to them. Well, I'm not telling you that just to make you feel bad, because we all have these feelings. I just want you to know that I was one of those people that was looked down upon. I was a shepherd. My father was a shepherd. My grandfather was a shepherd. I grew up in the hills outside of the towns with my father taking care of the sheep. I never had an opportunity to go to the synagogue schools because we were always working. These clothes that we wear, we worked in them, we slept in them, we worked with the sheep in them. So I guess the point I'm making is that oftentimes you would smell me coming before you saw me coming. Being a shepherd was on the low end of society, according to most people. And so we were really considered outcasts from our communities. But in reality, that really didn't matter much because we were hardly ever in our communities. We were always out with the sheep, taking care of the sheep, protecting them from the predators, four-legged and two-legged also. You know, the thing that always kind of puzzled me was the greatest king that our people ever had, King David. He started out as a shepherd. You would have thought that would have had some bearing on what people thought of shepherds, but it didn't. But oh well. I got to tell you that I loved my life as a shepherd. And a lot of my friends didn't. Their dads were shepherds also, and they would have given anything to have a different career. But for me, I loved working with my dad, working with my grandfather, working with my brothers. I loved the life we led, living outside. I loved the sheep. Oh, I know a lot of people say, sheep, they're just dumb animals. Well, maybe that's so. But with them being so dumb, that made our job that much more important. It was so critical that when they were sick, we found them. When they hurt themselves, we would find them. We would bring the sheep together at night. They would come all into one big flock. And by morning, this is the part that I always loved so much. Every morning, the shepherds would go into the flock, and just with their voice, the sheep would get up, sort themselves out, and follow the shepherd that they belong to. I never tired of seeing that. Every single morning that would happen. You might think that because I didn't get to go to synagogue school, that I was uneducated. But that's not the case. You see, my education occurred, I guess, somewhat like you would describe your homeschooling. I spent 24 hours a day with my father and my grandfather, and they made sure that I knew the history of our people. They made sure that I knew all the kings from Saul on down. I could tell you every single one of them, and I could tell you about each one of them. And I could tell you which ones were good kings and which ones really didn't measure up. I could tell you about the history of our people, starting from Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. I could tell you about the judges. I could tell you about all the prophets of old. But the most important thing I could tell you was about the promise that God had made to our people that He would be coming to do something miraculous for us. We've been waiting hundreds of years for this to happen. Now, a lot of people had given up, but not us. We knew that God would still come and do something very, very special for us. But little did I know that I would be witness to that miracle. Let me tell you about that night. That night is what we called it. And when we said that night, everyone knew what we were talking about. So let me just describe what happened. We had our sheep on the hills outside of a little town called Bethlehem. We had them all bedded down for the evening. We built a fire like we did every night, and we were sitting around the fire, and we were all kind of talking about who had worked the hardest that day. It was a beautiful night, very dark. There was not a moon in the sky, but there had to have been 1,000,000 stars. It was just such a special night. And all of a sudden, there was a bright light. And in the middle of that bright light, there was an angel. I don't know how I knew it was an angel. I'd never seen an angel before, but I'm telling you, it was an angel. And it said, "Fear not." I tell you what, he hit the nail on the head with that one, because, I mean, we were about ready to, you know what, in our pants at that point. But then I remember exactly the words he said at that point. "Behold, I bring good news of great tidings to you, to all the people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And this will be a sign for you. You will find the babe wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." And then it happened. The skies opened up with a brilliant multitude of angels. And they all started to sing. And the music was the most beautiful thing that has ever happened on this earth. Well, I'm telling you that shepherds don't leave their sheep. But when that happened, we packed up and we took off running for Bethlehem. And sure enough, there we found the baby and Mary and Joseph, just as the angels had said. We told Mary and Joseph about what had happened, and they just smiled at us. We looked at that baby. And looked at that baby laying there, just as the angels had told us it would be. And I knew that this was what God had promised for us. This was the miracle that we'd been waiting hundreds of years for. Well, I'm not going to bore you with what my life was like after that. I was just a common shepherd. Pretty routine as far as shepherds go. But I will tell you, every chance we got, we told the story about that night. Oh, some people believed us. A lot of people laughed at us. Some people made fun of us. Some people got angry and told us we were spreading lies. But we knew. We knew because we were there. From that point on, my friends and I all wanted to know as much about the Scriptures as we possibly could. Because all of a sudden, those prophecies of old, they seemed to make sense to us in a new way. And I vowed to find out as much about that Jesus as I possibly could. Well, as you can imagine, it was quite a while until we actually heard anything more about that Jesus. As a matter of fact, by the time we started to hear things, I had my own flock, and my own son was helping me. And I want to assure you that he knew the story about that night. And he never tired of me telling it. He would ask me over and over again. Finally, we started to hear of more words. We heard about a guy that was traveling the countryside, teaching, preaching. His name was Jesus. We heard stories that the blind were seeing, the deaf were hearing, the dumb were speaking. We heard about more than one person who had been dead and was now alive. You would have thought everyone would have wanted to follow this Jesus. But we also started to hear stories about the religious leaders hated him. They wanted to get rid of him. And then we heard a story. It was the worst thing that we could possibly have heard. We heard that Jesus was arrested and killed in Jerusalem. How could God have allowed that to happen? Then a few weeks later, we started to hear more stories. People claimed that they had seen him alive. My son said to me, "Dad, do you think that's possible?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know, but I have to find out." So I left my sheep with my son and my father. And I went to the place where people said they'd been seeing Jesus. I was there. Your Apostle Paul wrote about how Jesus showed himself to more than 500 people at one time. It was true. It was true. I was one of those 500. I heard him teach. I went up to him and I told him about that night. And he looked at me and smiled. And he gave me the biggest hug. And it was then that I saw his hands. The scars were still there from the nails. I can't understand the love of God. I can't understand why I got to experience that. I didn't deserve that. I can't understand how God can give up his Son, the body and blood of his own Son, for each and every one of us. The love of God. I don't deserve it. The love of God, I can never earn it. But God is calling us. God is calling each and every one of us to come to the altar and open our hearts and accept that love of God, that gift that we can't earn, that gift that we don't deserve. It's there for us, each and every one of us. God is calling. Do you hear him?